Hello friends, Jeff here from Squadron. Welcome back to another segment of the build of the F-14A Tomcat. So let's get started. Alright guys, since our last session, I'm going to remove the tape here. We're going to do some more of the body work. Before we start painting the cockpit, I would like to finish the midsection and apply the intakes and also the inner workings of this kit, also mounting the wings maybe. So we have this complete midsection done. As I explained last week or last session, after removing the tape, although it's a pretty tight fitting and I don't see any seam lines, I'm just gonna put a small bead of super glue around it just to make sure that we won't run into problems and we have a smooth transition between the upper and the lower fuselage halves. So all along where the seam is, I'm going to do a small amount of super glue. The super glue will also not only work as a glue but also as a putty. It's going to be easier to clean up and make a less mess. Let's take the tape off and then see where we have to apply some of the super glue. At first glance I don't see any major problem, so I'm even at this point I'm even doubting I want to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a brief sanding here with very gently with a medium sanding stick all around the edges here where we glued the two fuselage halves together around the seams. And if I see any inconsistencies or any blemishes, then that's where we can add a little bit of super glue and then use it as a filler. So let's do that. Again, when you do this, don't apply too much pressure. Just let you just caress actually the seam line. You do not want to take a lot of plastic away because it's not necessary. It's more like a polishing. This is a fine sanding stick. It doesn't even take major plastic off. It's just something to polish and give you a better view on where you might have to add some super glue. Like for instance here I see a little tiny bit, so I might correct that, but other than that it's a pretty tight fit. Also in this area be very careful. You see the transition between the upper deck and the side. You do not want to take too much off because else you're gonna have like a soft transition and you don't want that. It needs to stay a little bit crisp and it needs to keep its shape. So be very careful on both corners that you don't take too much plastic off because else you probably have to restore it, and that will take away a bunch of the detail. So be very, very gentle when you sand or try to get rid of the seam. This side doesn't need anything, just a perfect fit. Apparently when you go over the edges, you can't avoid it, but you're probably gonna erase some of the panel lines here right on the seam. That's a problem you're always going to have when you have to at least make a seam smooth or try to get all the blemishes out. We'll address that later. There is a trick, it's no big deal. It's very easy to repair. You just have to make sure that the whole seam line is very smooth and then eventually you can restore the panel lines. Okay, as you can see, to do this I only use the medium and the fine sanding stick. You have to be a little bit more patient, but I would not suggest or advise using a coarse sanding stick. I think the medium has enough grit to take care of it. So now that we're done with this, I can see that here where there's a little dust that crept into the seam line, this is where I'm going to apply a little bit of super glue and then let it dry completely until it gets very, very hard, and then eventually I will sand it again and then we'll have a smooth transition and there will be no seam line visible anymore. For this I use the medium formula. You can do it with the thick, you can do it with the thin if you don't have anything else close, but the medium is a little bit in between. That doesn't run as fast, and also when it's too thick it might not get really into the deepest part of the seam. The medium you can control a little bit better than the other two. For this I will use the tip of my knife. Again, it just has to be a little small bead in the areas where there is a little, like where the seam is a little bit sunken. Again, don't overdo it. And then we do a little bit here. Do the same on the other side. There you go. Now we have sealed the seam between the upper and the lower fuselage halves. We're going to put that away and let it dry for like a little bit. In the meantime, we can focus on the assembly of the intakes, as you can see here on page 8 of the instruction sheet. So we got the engine facing turbines, turbine blades, and then the intake duct, and then the complete intake assembly. Let's take care of that first. This is also the way that they engineered it. It's practically impossible to detect the seam. So to clean that up, that's going to be easy. I'm going to run a little bead of plastic weld on the inside just to secure the seam lines. Okay, move this to the other side. Okay, we do the same. We get just a little bead of glue just to be sure that everything stays in place. I'm not really worried about the inside because you barely can see it. I don't think we have to do much sanding in here. I'm just going to go ahead and put the turbines in place. And there we have it. Tamiya made sure that those things couldn't get switched around, so this is the right side, and they made a left mark on both of these intake ducts. It's good to know. Here we have part of the intake. It's very refined. As you can tell, it's very thin here, but there is no warpage. So also the feel of the plastic is to Tamiya standards. Sometimes you have like very hard plastic, like Asagawa used to, or maybe still have. It's a really hard plastic, and then you have other companies that really have like a rather soft plastic, and that tends to warp or deform sometimes. It all depends on the subject, but this is just the right consistency, I guess. It's easy to manipulate, easy to cut, easy to sand. It doesn't really warp. Again, be very careful, especially on these flimsy parts here, when you're cutting off the attachment tabs to the sprues, that you don't cut into the plastic. Try to really not to damage them too much. It's better to cut a little bit off and sand the rest than to try to cut most of it and then you get into the plastic and then you have to repair it. So take your time. Also, by doing this, try to make sure that you don't compromise the points here, because it's very sharp and it's a very sharp edge, very clean, and you do not want to chip anything on this. You need to really leave them intact. Let's try this one. Don't know if you can tell it from this angle. It's a nice transition here. There's almost no seam. Even when you look into from the front, it seems to be very well engineered. Now there are two ejection pin marks here and here that you have to remove before you can glue the duct in place. Best thing is to use a medium sanding stick and try to, from the back here, try to get rid of it. I don't think it will take all that much. I don't think there is need for any putty. Maybe with a piece of sandpaper, try to remove that, because that will be visible. That's a good thing with a sanding stick. You can put some pressure on it, bend it a little, and still you'll be able to get in there in a narrow spot, and at the same time get some pressure. You might even take a coarse sanding stick just to get most of the stuff off. Eventually you work yourself back to a fine. This is probably the only part of the kit that needs some sanding to try to get the ejection pin marks away, and because it's a visual area, not really highly visible, but it's the first thing you look into. If you look into the intakes and you might see an ejection mark, not always a good thing. But in plastic injection there are some limitations. Tamiya went beyond the Call of Duty to at least reduce them to a minimum, but in this case I don't think there was another possibility to leave those out. It takes a little bit extra work, not much, it's even neglectable, but make sure you don't forget it. There you go. Now we can glue this in place. This might need a little bit of maybe some super glue or some putty around the seam, because now you still have the chance to get in there and fill it up. So I guess that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna apply a little bit of putty around it. Apply a little bit of putty on the seam lines here. Not much, just a tad, because the more putty you put on there, the harder it will get to remove it. So try to keep it to a minimum. Well, this is drying. We'll prepare the other side and do exactly the same. Again, make sure you don't compromise those 2 points here. They're very, very fragile and very delicate. Try always to keep it away from your table or away from any object. So, and especially don't, sometimes when you're sanding, it's easy to forget what you're doing when you concentrate on a certain point. Sometimes you forget to look at the other side, and then you might rub it against something, and then those things will, it's very important that they stay sharp. Let's put it this way. It's gonna test fit in one of the intakes that I prepared earlier. Like, again, snaps in position. This is where I explained in one of the previous sessions around the old Hasegawa kit, which, by the way, it's still an okay kit. It's still one of the better ones out there, but they had a lot of issues around the intakes here where the fit was almost horrendous. But in this case, I don't see any troubles at all. It's a perfect fit. Let's sand the other part of the intake on the other side. Start to get the ejector taps away. Sand them flush. A little bit tedious process, but has to be done. Put the other part of the intake duct in place. And then, like we did with the right side, we'll add some putty to camouflage the seam, the internal seam here. Again, reduce it to the absolute minimum, because whatever you do or you apply, you have to sand flush. Since it's in a cramped area, it's not always easy to get in there. Try to be a little bit conservative with applying the putty in there. Maybe you can use an old paintbrush or something. If you have a couple of hairs that still are usable, you might be easier to get into the crevices in the corners. Well, both of them are drying. I'm gonna go back and see if our super glue on the seam lines of the midsection of the fuselage is dry, and we can take care of that. Sand it flush again. Start out with a medium stick, and then after the medium stick we'll make it flush and buff out all the scratches with the fine sanding stick. Also make sure once you sand, you don't do it like in constant straight. Try to get around it, like making these curvy shapes or curvy motions. Don't try to do it in one direction, because you might flatten the thing and you create more problems later on. Just always try to, when you stay in motion, always make these curvy motions actually, so you keep the round edge of the shape that you're sanding. Don't worry too much that you might get some of the detail off. I mean, there's not much detail on there, but a few panel lines that you will see here, we can very easily restore those and correct those. So make sure that you get all the seams gone and that it's one flush transition, and then eventually we'll rescribe and restore the panel line. Okay guys, that was it for now. Visit us soon on our website at Squadron TV for the next chapter in the build. You can also like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, or subscribe to YouTube or Squadron TV itself. That way you'll get notifications when a new chapter is put up. So that was it for now. Jeff E here, signing off.